Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Baker, and this is Dave Daniels, and welcome to How to Effectively Launch Products with Internal Podcasts.
Oh, great. Thanks, Ben. And thanks for having me. I feel honored. So, just briefly about me, I'm the founder of a company called Brainkraft, BrainKraft.com. And our sole focus is to help organizations effectively launch their product. And we do that with something called the Brainkraft Product Launch Framework. And we support that with classes and coaching and so forth. And we got connected because I really like what you're doing around internal podcasts. And you said, "Hey, wait a minute, could we use an internal podcast for product launches?" And I go, "Yeah, that's a great idea. We should talk more about that." So here we are to talk about it.
There we go. And to give people a little bit about me, I've been in the communications game for 25 years now. The company is yourbrandmarketing.com, but the product is podcasthostforhire.com. And what we do is we create internal podcasts for companies $100 million and above to enable them to be able to move agendas forward, whether it's purpose and culture, whether it's change initiatives, or whether it's dealing with a product launch and making sure that everybody understands what's going on from the day that the concept is conceived to the time that it launches and beyond. So what I really want to do is I want to get into this concept and enable people to understand how it's going to benefit them, not only from the product manager's point of view, but from legal, from operations, from sales, from marketing to customer experience, how bringing a podcast internally into this process is going to allow people to succeed. So Dave, you're the expert in launching products. You've done hundreds and hundreds of launches for different organizations. Give people an understanding of what are the biggest challenges you see out there with large, complex launches.
Yeah, I mean, in particular, I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong, and some things are completely outside of certain groups' control. I'm thinking like marketing and sales is a great example because they're especially sales, they tend to be at the far receiving end of this. But stakeholder communications is a very big deal. We, as Ben, you and I explored this, we explored two aspects of internal podcast. One is just general stakeholder communication, like what's going on, where are we, what's the status, and consider your audience and provide the right content. Mm-hmm. But the other aspect, which I think is even more important, is the readiness aspect. And that is, how do we get different functional areas like those you listed up and ready and confident to be able to support a launch? And I got to tell you, readiness, you can have the greatest product in the world, but if you can't market it, sell it, deliver it, book revenue for it, and support your customers, you're not going anywhere with it.
Well, exactly. I mean, the problem is with most launches, from what I see through a lot of my customers, is sales, unfortunately, doesn't get read into the project until it's way too late. They're 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, maybe a month out, that they start getting all this sort of product training on a brand new thing that they didn't know anything about. In the meantime, they've got customers that they've already, booked projects with. They've already have meetings scheduled about other things that they're talking about. They have, product that they already know how to sell, and they have commissions that they need to have and quotas that they need to achieve. Mm-hmm. So if they are not read in, if this doesn't become a priority for them early on, because they understand how it's being sold, why it's being sold, who it's being sold to, what the advantages are, and why it's going to make their customers' lives better, they're going to continue to sell what they know they're going to make a profit on. So
absolutely.
So it's not that your customers don't like your new initiative. It's just your salespeople are not ready to sell it. And that's a real challenge. Or your customer service people are not willing to support it because they don't know what's going on around either.
Right. And no one wants to look foolish in any of these scenarios. So I spent years working with product managers and product marketing managers of all sizes of companies. And I got to tell you, it still amazes me to this day how few product marketers and product managers have even worn, if you will, the sales shoes. And I have been fortunate enough in my career I haven't been a bag carrying sales rep, but I was a sales engineer, so a technical pre-sale. So I got to go on the road with my sales team and learn the ropes and learn how to behave and what to say and not to say. And you begin to develop, by doing that, you develop a really deep appreciation for how hard that work is. Now, except for the companies that just happen to have the bottle rocket product and they sit there and they go, well, how many of these do you want? But that's not typical. What's more typical is it takes a lot of work. And as a rep, I see, this is the thing I also tell my product marketing colleagues. I said, look, if you launch a product and the product bombs, you've got a job tomorrow.
Yeah.
If that sales rep that you're counting on to sell the product doesn't hit their quota, they get the opportunity to work at another company. And this is fairly typical across all kinds of industries. It's the hero to zero scenario. And so they look at it from a standpoint of risk. So when you're launching a product and you've got starry eyes and you're like, oh, we're going to make gazillions of dollars and we're going to be heroes and they're going to talk about it. These sales reps are going, okay, it's October. I've got 3 more months to make my numbers. And now you're telling me you're going to launch a product in November and you're expecting revenue by the end of the year. I'm going to smile and go, oh, that's fantastic. But I'm going to focus on my nut, which is to close enough business to hit my number for the quarter and hit my number for the year.
Well, exactly. And, that leads to unsuccessful launches because you're right. Your sales reps are going to sit there going, well, I'll concentrate on this in January. I'll concentrate on this in February.
That's right.
Once I've made my nut, once I've sold my quota for the quarter, fine, then I'll deal with it. But until then, they're risk adverse.
Yeah, it's like la 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 la. It's noise. Don't tell me about this, because while it might be intellectually stimulating to learn about something new, let me tell everybody else who's listening, maybe who hasn't been in sales. There's this magical thing called club, right? It's the chairman's club. It's the president's club. Let me tell you, it's nice to go to club, and you are not going to get in my way of getting to club by me spending some time talking about, or not focusing on the business at hand, which is to get my numbers. I might be interested in what you're doing. And honestly, the dumbest thing that happens in launches as it relates to sales teams is they fail to incorporate the rhythms of the business. Right? When's your end of quarter? When's your end of year? Right? If you plan to launch at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, you're setting yourself up for failure, because my team is not going to be listening to a word you say, even if you spend lots of money to get them together. Which brings me back to podcasts, right? Podcast is a beautiful way for people, say in sales, to consume information that could be beneficial, and little 10, 15, 20-minute bites at a time.
Yeah.
So in between calls, I could listen to a podcast. While I'm out cutting the grass, I could listen to a podcast. While I'm driving somewhere, I can listen to a podcast. And in days like, say, last year or year before, I could listen to a couple of them while I'm on a flight going somewhere. So the point being is it's not rigid. Like, I don't have to schedule everybody to be there. I can push it out. I can make it available. I can be available for feedback and comments, and I can give them information in bite-sized pieces that they can consume, assimilate, and then give a little bit more.
Right. And the nice thing about it is you can do it over a long period of time. You knew you were starting this launch a year ago. How good would it be to be able to get buy-in from people early into the process? How is it easy to say, okay, we're going to start a podcast 9 months, 12 months before launch. that starts talking at it from different people's angles. Let's get somebody from legal involved and say, okay, what are the legal ramifications of creating this? What about our customer service team? What are the things that customer service is going to need to be able to support this? What does sales need to be able to do this? Maybe get a few of the sales customers under non-disclosure to come in and talk about, listen, these are the challenges that we're having. If we could wave a magic wand, these are the type of things that we would like. And it helps with product development early on. It allows for the different teams to talk to each other and for sales to get not only get buy-in from them because they know about what's happening early, but they get their voice on the podcast as well to be able to say, listen, this is what we're hearing from our customers. These are the things like, and also saying, hey, listen, launching this thing in November is a bad time to do this. So we need to sit there and go, okay, how do we as an organization communicate effectively through the organization in ways that's going to allow people to feel not only that they're listened to, but that they're understood and they're valued. So everybody within the organization, when we get to the go, no go stage, 72 hours out, a week out, a week and a half out, everybody's on board. Everybody's sitting there going, yep, we know what we need to do. We know what the launch date is. We've got all the materials in front of us. We're bought into the marketing materials where the customer service team knows how they're going to support this when the questions come in. And we're ready to go on this thing.
Absolutely. Well, there's a very loaded question the CEO asks and doesn't always get the direct answer. And that question is, will we be ready? That's the question they asked.
Yeah.
And that's a very loaded question. It doesn't mean will the product be ready? It means will the entire organization be ready? Can we start building a pipeline? Have we already started to do that? When will we start building a pipeline? Will my sales team be competent enough and comfortable enough to talk about the product with clarity to their prospective customers? So I'd like to bifurcate a little bit, right? So if we look at launching products from two lenses, I think you could see the degree at which you could use a podcast as an effective communication tool. Number one, if I'm launching a new product into a market my entire organization is familiar with, and I don't even have to call on a different buyer, right? So it's well within our comfort zone. The level of communication doesn't have to be as rigorous.
Right.
But what if we're launching a product into the same market or into a new market, but we have a different set of buyers? The risk goes way up, right? We haven't marketed to these people before. We haven't sold to these people before. We haven't supported them before. We may be philosophically, at the PowerPoint level, we may understand how they make a buying decision and what the problems are and everything, but that's a whole lot different than actually doing it. So in that kind of scenario, I could see where a podcast could build on things like, let me tell you about the market we're going into. And that could be just one. And then just kind of paint the picture of, how big an opportunity this is for us. And then I might have podcasts that cover, who are the people you're likely to encounter and what do they care about? So on the marketing side, we refer to those as buyer personas. On the sales side, we refer to them as ideal customer profile. So who should I be looking at? Who is marketing going to bring in? So to help us build that pipeline, I might be looking at things like, who are the competitors I'm going to encounter and how do we talk about us versus them? And so that's just an example. I mean, it could be the head of sales having a podcast on comp plans and how they're related to the new product. There's a whole lot that can go on in the podcast to cover different aspects. And I think what happens, and I'm guilty, I just want to say I'm guilty here.
Yeah, me too, probably.
We say, oh, well, we got to do sales enablement for the new product we're launching. They go, okay, when do you want to do that? And they give you here's an hour. And so now you try to cram everything you could possibly cram into that hour or half a day, and there just is not enough time to do it effectively. And there's one thing that everybody should know about really good sales reps. They're very smart at managing their time, and they're just-in-time consumers of information. So give them a little, they'll absorb it. Like layers of an onion, right? But in reverse. So we start with the first layer, then we add a layer, then we add a layer, then we add a layer. But if we do that at 10 or 15 minutes at a time, the likelihood of the retention is going to go way up. And oh, by the way, they don't have to call anybody to figure it out because there's the queue of podcasts.
Right.
With titles that they can search, and they can go find, where was that podcast on such and such? And you will know whether this is sticking because sales reps will start emailing links to the podcast to their colleagues to say, oh, here's how you do this, and here's a good podcast on that. And it builds its own inertia.
Well, not only that, but as you get closer to the date and you start bringing in your sales partners, your distribution channels, et cetera, that, once you could lift the curtain and letting people know what's going on, there's a whole range of information that's the back door of what's happened that you can let the distribution channel in on. So all of a sudden, they're not just sitting there going, you're right, because, product launches from a sales point of view and, from a customer experience point of view and from a lot of different points of view is like drinking out of a fire hose.
It's totally like drinking out of a fire hose.
You get a ton of information all at the same time. And the question is, what of it is valuable and what isn't it valuable? And, when it's thrown at you all at once, when you go away for those 3 days boot camps to get ready for the launch.
Guilty.
Oh yeah, I've run them. I've been to them. I've done all those things. You sit there going, at the end of the 3 days, nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows what's happening. Nobody understands, and nobody cares. Because you're right. Instead of feeding it to them bit by bit over a 6 months, 9 months, a year situation, you fed it to them all in one shot. And all of a sudden it goes in one ear, it goes out the other. And all you have is a whole bunch of people that are looking at each other. Did you get it? Did you? No, I didn't get it. Are you going to ask? I'm not going to ask any questions. You ask questions.
I used to, in a previous role, I was involved with teaching product marketing folks, all professionals all over the world. I taught thousands. And we used to have a conversation about sales readiness and training and all like that. When some companies are really big, so it's hard to get everybody together. But a lot of companies I dealt with, they would get them together, 100, 50, 100, 200, 300 people together at one time. And I said, have you ever noticed while you're up there giving your glorious presentation about the brand new product and how awesome it's going to be, most of your sales reps are doing this, right? They're texting each other. They're talking about, where they're going to go to dinner, or whether they can get some time in to go golf, or who's going to work out with me. And then every now and then they'll hear something interesting and they'll look up and then they'll say, oh, Ben's talking about that. And they put it down and they keep going. And then eventually they hear something interesting. They look up, oh, Dave's talking about that. What they do is they catalog information.
Right.
And they're not memorizing anything. What they're doing is they're creating an index in their mind. And that index is, when I need information on topic X, I'm going to call Ben. I'm going to send Ben an email. And when it's on Y, I'm going to talk to Dave and I'm going to call him up. And so now Ben and Dave start getting emails and messages on their inbox about the same thing over and over and over again.
And if you have 1,000 sales reps, God help you.
Oh, well, not only that, but then you start getting smart. You say, well, you send an email out to everybody and you say, hey, everybody, read this. It answers a lot of your questions. Or, oh, we created an FAQ for you. And they go, baloney, it's more efficient for me just to call Ben.
Yeah.
Why should I read the damn thing when I'm looking for the one thing that Ben has right here? Well, podcasts just make that so much better, because Now I can point them to the repository, if you will, of podcasts, and they could just do a search and find it themselves, and they can just listen to it while they're doing something else. So how amazing is it? Now I don't want to, we don't want to lose anybody here on what we mean by internal podcasts, because I know some folks are going, oh my goodness, that information is going to get to our competitors.
Yeah.
Well, no, we're talking about behind the firewall, only your employees can get access to. Now, you can set it up so they can't download it and all like that. They can only stream it. So, so there are protection mechanisms that Ben is the expert on, and he can help you with. But those of you who are sales leaders, or you head up product marketing, or you head up marketing, I mean, every week you could do what Ben and I are doing for 15 minutes and have a chat, record it. It doesn't have to be polished. Post it, let everybody know it's there. And before you know it, you're going to get your own traction.
No, and it's true, because the nice thing about a podcast is not only is it a podcast, but you have the ability to sit there and say, okay, we have this as video. People could download it as an audio file, because some people like watching video, some people like audio, some people actually want the text of it. So what you do is you transcribe the entire, podcast, so you have it as a text-based format. So that way your engineers, your lawyers, the people that want to look at it on an analytical basis have the ability to grab it and actually read the text. It's great for marketing as well, because marketing can highlight it and sit there and say, wait a second here, that sentence is gold, and be able to use it as future marketing. You can also take the podcast and cut it up into little pieces and say, listen, this is what sales needs to know. This is what legal needs to know. This is what ops needs to know. This is what, so people can sit there and say, okay, I don't have time to listen to a 35-minute podcast, but here's what I need to know as a salesperson. There's so many different things you can do depending on what's, how large the organization is, how different people consume information, what you need to know. And, podcasts can be once a week going in, but think about the last 30 days before you go launching, you may want to do a podcast every day or every other day or daily, and then one a day for the 30 days after it launches. To be able to sit there and go, best practices. Here's some things that are working. Here's some things that aren't working. Here's what our customers are saying. This is how we should tweak it, and give people that day-to-day, 15, 20-minute update about what's working, what's not working. So there's so many different things. And you're right. It's behind a firewall where nobody can get at it. You take out, the coding, so people can't just sit there and be able to share the email or the voice or the YouTube. But when you do that, it becomes a repository of searchable information that people can look at 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, no matter what time zone they're in.
Exactly. And there's another thing I thought of while you were explaining that. What about the analytics?
Exactly.
You're pumping all this content out. Can you see who's actually, whether it's being consumed or not?
There is absolutely different ways of being able to look at it, depending on what analytics you have on your website, to be able to take a look at it and say, okay, we know the IP addresses. How long is this stuff looked at? Like, okay, the average person, are they looking at it for 5 minutes, or looking at it for 10 minutes, or looking at 15 minutes? Maybe our podcasts are too long. Maybe we need to shorten them. Maybe, if 95% of the people are reading them all to the way to the end, maybe they're too short. Maybe you're not giving enough information. Giving people a feedback loop on a podcast so they can ask questions, and then
that's a good point.
And then all of a sudden you have a feedback loop to sit there and say, okay, I got this, but I didn't get this. I didn't understand this. What do you mean by that? So that way you can bring it up in the next podcast and say, listen, here's some questions that we got from the last podcast. Let's talk about those things.
Right. And they're right there, and they're all in one place, and you can search through them.
Yeah. And it's not like a Slack channel that all of a sudden scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls and scrolls, and you can't find that information that happened 6 months ago.
Right. Yeah. Good points. I wish that in the days when I was doing product launches in the beginning, and they were getting progressively bigger and bigger, I would have loved to have a podcast. I mean, the first thing that we started doing is we would do internal webinars. You certainly could do that, but gosh, podcast just makes so much easier. Like, flip the switch. Here's the topic, put some structure around it, bang, bang, bang. Do them for about 5 or 10 minutes to begin. And you're right. Look at the analytics. Are they too short? Are they too long? Another tip I would suggest, particularly around sales enablement, one topic per podcast.
Absolutely.
Don't do 15 things in one. If you have 15 things to talk about, do 15 podcasts, even if they're a few minutes apiece. But don't think, oh my goodness, they're only going to listen to one of them. I better put everything I ever wanted them to know into one. Well, you just recreated the same problem you started with.
Yeah. So I want to leave it there because, I mean, there's so much more that we can talk about. There's absolutely, yes. And please, if you need to talk about specifically about product launches, please get in touch with Dave. If I can help you about internal podcasts, how to set it up, how to do it, we even voice those podcasts for you to be able to be the person. So it's a soup to nuts option, to be able to put the whole thing together for you and be able to be that third party voice that's on the podcast that enables it to not have, somebody without skin in the game, somebody without a dog in the fight. And it makes it far better to interview everybody when it's not somebody that has a hidden agenda. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully we've been able to answer a lot of questions. Whatever we can do to solve your problems, we're here for you. Thanks for being part of this.
Hey, Ben, thanks for having me too.